Leaders are feeling overwhelmed, and 72% of senior executives are making bad decisions at least as often as good decisions, if not more often. We're no longer driving on the highway. We're now losing our lane markers and we're on open terrain.
Cornelia Choe, international expert and speaker on leadership, and CEO of the Leaders Alliance, an organization empowering CEOs, C-suite members, and vice presidents spanning 5 continents. Cornelia has provided invaluable guidance and support to top-tier leaders and global enterprises.
Our mental map is helpful in giving us everything we need to make decisions until the landscape changes. What am I missing? Who's not at my table?
What do you mean in your words, Panoramic Leader? And why did you feel this was the book that leaders needed right now?
It's the ability to...
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the World Class Leader Show. And today as well, I'm so excited to have a fantastic guest that has an opportunity to meet behind the scene, and today is here with us. So it's Cornelia Choe. Cornelia is international expert and speaker on leadership and CEO of the Leaders Alliance, an organization empowering CEOs, C-suite members, and vice presidents spanning 5 continents. Cornelia has provided invaluable guidance and support to top-tier leaders across different sectors, including the heads of some of the largest multilateral organizations, government, and global enterprises, from startups to Fortune 500 companies. Cornelia previously worked in private equity funds at Morgan Stanley and other institutions, supporting and investing in leadership teams across Asia, Europe, and North America, navigating complex international growth and change. Cornelia holds a BS in political science from Georgetown University and MPA in leadership from Hubert Kennedy School. She lived in 7 countries and fluent in 3 languages, and we have something in common. We'll talk about this. Cornelia now shapes the future of leadership, transformative change, and connectivity on a global scale. She's currently based in Geneva, in Switzerland, where she lives with her husband and 2 children. And she's a new author of a book that she will explain, and she will talk more about it. So, Cornelia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's such a pleasure to share this conversation with you.
So, Cornelia, let me start with one question. So let's open with what I said at the end, about a book. So you are an author. You are about to publish a book called The Panoramic Leader. So what is the Panoramic Leader? So let's start specifically with that, and then we're going to go through your story, because it lives inside of the book too. Why now? So why do you mean, in your own words, what do you mean in your words, Panoramic Leader? And why did you feel this was the book that leaders needed right now?
Well, Marshall Goldsmith and I wanted to come together and write a book about how to succeed in this new world of constant change that we have today. And change, the nature of change is different today. Usually it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And today, before one change cycle ends, another starts, and another starts, between wars and economic downturns, inflation, ecological disasters, and technology that's really disrupting the way we work and live today. And we have these overlapping changes. It's like dominoes going in all different directions. And it's leaving a lot of people feeling overwhelmed and trying to figure out how to deal with this constant change that we have today. And at the same time, we're even more affected by change because of the interconnectedness of the world today. If you look at that 2008 financial crisis, what started in the mortgage market in one country quickly spread to every major economy in the world. And so we're vulnerable to a lot more change happening around the world. And lastly, leaders are feeling overwhelmed and surprised by the growing number of stakeholders that can affect their organizations or their companies. For example, this could be an influencer who could be a generation younger than you, who's now affecting your business, or a government halfway around the world creating what seems like arbitrary decisions. So leaders are feeling overwhelmed, and a McKinsey study showed that 72% of senior executives are making bad decisions at least as often as good decisions, if not more often. And this is really a dilemma that we have. And so we wanted to come together and help people find a way to deal with all of this change. And today we're, if we're driving our organizations as leaders, we need to keep our foot on the gas pedal and look out the rear view mirror. But because of all this change today, Andrea, we also need to turn our heads and look left and right out the windows constantly, because the institutions that we've relied on our whole lives, like governments. Well, today we have a declining trust in institutions and governments.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
the way we work today, working from home, and the average person changes jobs at least 12 times during their career. All these institutions are changing. So we're no longer driving on the highway. We're now losing our lane markers and we're on open terrain. So the question is, how do you deal with this, and how are you aware of keeping your organization safe and growing and accelerating in this kind of an open world? And the answer is panoramic leadership. It's the ability to really understand all directions and the stakeholders around you, and to put together their perspectives so that we're able to see in 3D what's happening around us instead of just looking forward. And
Yeah.
I could give you an example of a panoramic leader. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go
for
on.
example, Alan Mulally is, for us, a quintessential panoramic leader. He was the president and CEO of Ford Motor Company from 2006 to 2014. But when he took over, Ford was facing an enormous loss of well over $10 billion. And he needed to turn the company around very quickly. And what he did was to get up close to all of his stakeholders. So he met with the head of the United Auto Workers within a few weeks of starting. He got up close to all levels of employees by eating in the employee cafeteria instead of the executive dining hall. And if he had done this just once, then probably employees would have been too shy to share what they were really thinking, meeting their boss's boss.
Yes.
But he did this often, and he was able to gain the trust of employees and to really understand at many different levels how people were thinking. And he got up
Yes.
close to reporters, and investors, and customers by working in dealerships, and selling cars, to understand those perspectives as well. And ultimately, he was able to put together these perspectives to get a deeper understanding of exactly what was happening at Ford and turn the company around. And by the time he left in 2014, the share price of the company had more than doubled, and he had a 90% approval rating. And I mean, it was a huge success.
Yes, and we can, just unpack this point for an hour, because, for example, even in my book, I mentioned Alan,
Hmm.
because for that specific reason that you said,
Hmm.
but also for his ability to have a strong conviction and leading with identity, leading with a very clear identity in terms of what he wants to see.
Hmm.
And I also think what you are implying is the level of curiosity that is needed at the top to make sure that you can see different perspective, not only hear but see, because whatever perspective that you have in your mind, they
Hmm.
become truth if you don't challenge them. So I love this idea of panoramic lead in terms of looking at 360 degrees and
Hmm.
don't be stuck with one single version of whatever truth that you have in mind. So that's great. So that's such a great start, Cornelia. I'd like to go back to your journey, though, because I'm sure that your journey has impacted, affected the way how you see the world,
Hmm.
and clearly the idea of the book. And by the way, working with Marshall Goldsmith, I think it is such an incredible opportunity,
Hmm.
and also I think it's something that you can be proud of. And Marshall has a so great experience in working with so many leads in great
He's
companies,
wonderful. Yeah.
but it's wonderful.
Hmm.
And you said at the beginning, I mean, I said in the bio that you lived and worked across different countries and culture. That's
Hmm.
exactly as we share in the background, similar experience.
Yeah.
So I probably get it why you see the world in a certain way,
Hmm.
but it would be important for the audience to understand how that journey has maybe quietly shaped the way how you think, and most important, the way how you then you describe, as
Mhm.
you said, in panoramic leadership?
Sure. It's a good question because I didn't start off with a framework. I started off with a lot of questions because precisely as you said, I moved around a lot. So I lived in 3 different continents by the time I was 18. And I was born and raised in Minnesota in the United States and had a fairly happy and calm childhood up until then. At school, my teachers, I was quite a quiet student, and my teachers would always write in my evaluations, Cornelia needs to demonstrate more leadership. She needs to stand in front of the class. She needs to do more presentations. She needs to be much louder. And so that worked well. I was able to grow and develop until I moved to Korea. When I started to get the feedback that I was too bold, I was really brazen, shameless in some ways because I wasn't shy enough in going up to the front of the class and presenting. And it really hit me because what I had been trying to work on now, I was given the opposite feedback. And I started to, from that very early age, from this really conflicting feedback, started to understand that when you see the same thing from different angles, you're able to, once you reconcile what's happening, you're able to see so much more. You're able to see 3D instead of just looking forward. And so I learned in Korea that leadership often is conducted through one-on-one conversations, through very quiet conversations in the back with people to understand if they're on
Mm.
board or not and to address their concerns. And this in turn helped me when I moved back to America in working with people who didn't feel comfortable with someone talking to them very loudly in front of a group. They needed a more quiet, attention based connection. And so this expanded my repertoire, but more importantly, it taught me that I needed to put together my own composite map of how the world works. And this is what I started to do that started to bring me to the idea of panoramic leadership and to create a framework in adding a lot of different angles throughout my life and different ways of seeing things. And so as I started to do this, I created my own operating system and how uniquely I was able to put together everything I saw. And by the time I was 20, a friend of mine said, Cornelia, you travel around the world putting together the best of every country that you've lived in. And I
Oh,
thought,
that's great.
that was a very nice comment. And I hadn't thought about it. I just was trying to survive day to day and do the best that I could. And that's when it really clicked that there's a logic to this. And you have to be intentional about structuring this because
Yes.
getting feedback that's different from all angles can be very, very difficult.
It's great. And that also remind me one thing that I learned early days in my career. So when I started to travel for work,
Hmm.
and I had a very intense traveling experience
Mm.
for at least 15 years until I moved to the UK, and
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
where I still live. And one thing that I was working for a large corporate company, and I attended one training at the early days before all the traveling experience, and they told me this idea of the culture C, meaning we all come from our own culture, which we can call it culture A. That is our set of behaviors, habits, mental maps, and we'll come back to mental maps. Due to our own experience.
Yeah.
Then, when we move to another country, we experience another culture that could be, in most cases, what you can call a culture B. So it's very different most of the time, not always, but even in our own country, right? We have a different cultures, and their idea was, instead of sticking with culture A or totally embrace culture B because you're going to lose your own identity, the best position would be creating like kind of hybrid new culture for yourself where you can get the most out of the culture A and culture B. And that really stuck in my mind for many years. And during all my traveling experience, that really helped me to fill in, adapt, but without fully immerse myself in something that maybe was very different from my own pattern of behaviors and Anyway, I think I
Yeah.
wanted to share. Yeah,
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 I love what you said about your identity, because we do need to reconcile our identity in how we see ourselves in different cultures and how we see ourselves as a amalgam of all of these different ways of seeing
correct,
the world.
correct.
And I love that point.
So talking about mental maps, so you use the idea of mental maps a lot in the book.
Hmm.
So, there are a lot of great leaders in listening and watching this episode and our show. But if we look at the CEOs, which is primarily why, this podcast is being created. So what is a mental map in your experience, and how does it actually shape the way how people make every decision every day? And the reason I'm asking specifically about CEOs thinking, because um, we interview a lot of CEOs here, and most of them, they bring it up in a conversation, not because I asked them, but really because that's what is in their mind, how they make decision, the importance how they make decision, give it the little time that they have to make decisions, to inform the organizations. That is critical for CEOs primarily. It's for all leaders, by the way. So tell me more about mental maps, how that plays inside of decision making.
Yeah, mental maps are really the composite of all of our experiences, our successes and our failures, our mentors, what we've learned along the way. And we put that together as our guidance system. It's really our internal GPS or our operating system for how to make decisions. And it's the story that we tell ourselves of how the world works. And according to that map, two leaders with two completely different maps who have very similar backgrounds can make drastically different decisions. And it's so important to be clear on our mental map, yet at the same time not fixed, because our mental map is helpful in giving us everything we need to make decisions until the landscape changes and our maps no longer reflect what's around us. And that's really the
Yes.
danger, because at a certain age or with a certain amount of success, it's very easy to say, I figured it out now. And that's very often the case. But in given the level of change that we have in the world today and the tectonic levels of change, we need to work constantly to be updating our maps with the perspectives of the people around us, and to ensure that we have a good range of perspectives from stakeholders around us, because we can be very active in updating our maps. But if we always speak with the same people who have the same blind spot as us, or who are all looking the same direction, nobody's looking behind us. And that's when leaders get in trouble with their mental maps. It takes constant work to update that and to make sure that we have what we need to really be able to triangulate the answer that we need, and to get as accurate as we can. And coming back to my personal story, I learned this at the age of 19, when I was invited to speak at the Fourth World Conference on Women, which is a United Nations global conference.
Wow.
And I was one of the youngest speakers there, and I was pulled into a meeting with heads of state and very senior government officials. And they asked me,
Wow.
so how can we help our economies? And I thought about it, and I gave an answer that was based on education and the importance um, of investing in our human capital within a country. And I'd lived in a few very different countries, so I'd given some examples from what I saw. But the point that I really took away from that experience was that it's so hard for leaders to get an accurate understanding of what's happening around them, because leaders often get the answer of what people think they want to hear, as opposed to what
Yes.
people are actually
Yes.
thinking. And so I realized that they needed to ask a 19-year-old for her opinion. And it was this fact that really struck me, saying leaders are working so hard to update their mental maps and to get an accurate understanding, that they're asking me. And when I gave my answer, they were nodding, and one person said that they would implement that. So that taught me how the challenge of being able to get an accurate understanding, which is already difficult for leaders, but even more so with the changing world. And then a
Yes.
couple months later, I was working in the office of the First Lady at the White House as an intern.
Oh,
And the
wow.
First Lady at the time was Hillary Clinton. And I remember standing outside close to the White House lawn in the sun. It was warm out. And I was having a really great conversation with Hillary. And after she left, I realized that she had asked me about a few things happening around the office and just a lot of different feedback. And I thought, it really affects leaders all over the world. They have a very similar challenge just by structurally by being a leader. And we need to work this hard at getting different viewpoints, even to
Yeah.
ask an intern what they thought and to add that data point to cover, to fill in the gaps in our map.
Well, first of all, congratulations for incredible advancement, I would say, that you made so early days. When people started to say that you were very shy, not speaking in front of people, and
Yeah.
they need your leadership then to to be able to be in front of these incredible people. So that's great, Cornelia, and that's such a great great example and sharing that you gave. That also brought me a question, because to me it requires a very high level of awareness. So
Mm-hmm.
if people are not aware about what kind of a mental map they're operating from,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be even more difficult, right,
You're
to
right.
embrace a new model, a
Mm-hmm.
new map.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is preventing people, some leaders,
Mm-hmm.
from operating from the new maps based on your experience?
It's really a question of, are we open to questioning the maps that we have in our minds? Because it's taken leaders a long time to formulate the winning map that they have found success with in their lives. It probably wasn't an easy journey. So once we find that, we think that what's working today will keep on working. And that's the dangerous part, when we have overconfidence in our past experiences and our past successes. And oftentimes, it's easy to stop mapping. And it's something that we call perspective blindness. And it's important to ask, what am I missing? And what
Yes.
angle can I explore? And who's not at my table? Because it's very easy and convenient to go more on an autopilot and to always ask the same advisors for the same answers, which the more it correlates with how we're thinking, the easier it is for us. And so that's the temptation, that in the very short run could be easier, but in the long run could be much more difficult. And if you look
Yes.
at the four-stage model of learning, it's a pyramid with
Yeah.
unconscious competence at the bottom, and then conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. And in a lot of tasks and in work where things don't change very much, maybe unconscious competence is the best way to go, because we're on autopilot. We are automatic. Things are easier. We don't need to re-question everything. But when the world is changing, the problem is we think we're going to go from unconscious competence, which is at the top, to then conscious competence and go one down, because that's how we built ourselves up. But the problem is that we don't go from unconscious competence to conscious competence. We go from unconscious competence to unconscious incompetence when the map flips around, and we don't know that we're going in the wrong direction. It's like
Yes.
when I'm in a new country. There was one time when I thought I was getting to my destination. I realized that my phone was upside down with a map, and that could flip anytime now that we have change. Um, so we have to be careful about the nature of our leadership. Are things changing around us all the time? And if they are, it may be better to step into conscious competence than to stay in unconscious competence and go on autopilot so much. So something to constantly keep in mind. And it's a joy to get to know different perspectives as well. And it's fast and efficient. It's easy to include this into our schedules. So just like Alan, he was able to get up close to a lot of different stakeholders without using up an awful lot of time. So it's something to keep in mind.
No, totally. And also to me is is a reminder. So I'm really, it really resonate what you said
Mm-hmm.
before in terms of the some of the leaders, they operate with their old map because that was useful for them before.
Mm-hmm.
That was a kind of their winning strategy. So they keep using the same map
Yeah.
because that were before, but they don't really appreciate how the change of context, environment, situation, all of that
Mm-hmm.
has an impact about that. And I think to me, that is probably the most valuable point
Mm-hmm.
for people in the audience to appreciate, to understand that, because again, and that connects as well to my research, to my book, is it has also an implication on your own identity, because
Mm-hmm.
what you describe as a mental map essentially is also includes your own identity, who you are.
Yes.
And when you started to show your own identity in the past because that worked, what unfortunately see many times is leaders, they operating with the same identity in different contexts, while
Mm-hmm.
the identity is a different identity might be needed in a different context. And people get a little bit lost there
Mm-hmm.
because they say, well, no, I'm not going to change who I am. Correct, but that the identity is not just who you are, it's what you stand for and what kind of leadership you're going to demonstrate in a different context.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm referring to is,
Mm-hmm.
and based on to your point, is if you started to embrace different perspective and you are starting to change your mental maps,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to see something different. You see that a different level of leadership.
Yeah.
So then even your identity is required in a
Mm-hmm.
different context. So to me,
Absolutely.
that is such a critical point in leadership.
I agree with you, Andrea, because the way we see ourselves and the way how we feel about our identity is also extremely important, and that we need to make sure that we're comfortable with who we are. If we act a certain way in one context and we are slightly different in a different context, are we okay with that? And one way to really help that is to expand our maps to say, we're not a different person here than here. This is one continuous map, and we're operating in a different part of the same map.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
the more we widen that, I can have quiet leadership in one country and, a more bold leadership in a different context. And that's okay, because once I realize it's part of the same picture, then it feels better.
Yes. Yes, that's great. So another thing that you introduced in the book is the GEM method.
Hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what the method is about, what is needed for,
Hmm.
and how it lives inside of this context of the panoramic leader?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the GEM framework is what we use to help leaders update their maps. And GEM is a three-step model. It's GEM for the acronyms Get Up Close, Establish Meaningful Bonds, and Map Your Evolving Perspective. And what to break them down, the first step, to get up close, that means to say, talk to your stakeholders and understand how they're thinking. What does the world look like from where they are? Do they see as
Yes.
opportunities and challenges, and how are they feeling? What is their perspective? And if something, it's not always possible to get up close to all of our stakeholders, but to the extent that we can, maybe it's reading about them or talking to someone else, um, approaching it from a different angle. And this is useful not just for the first meeting, but the more we can deepen our relationships with stakeholders, and this is the second step, establish meaningful bonds, the more we can establish a relationship that's based on trust. Because as we mentioned before, it's hard for leaders to get an accurate perspective from people right away, especially if there's a big gap in power between you. And so people often tell us what they think we want to hear. And the more our relationship is trust based, the higher the probability that we'll get the really important information and the truth of how they're seeing the world, and different things that we can pay attention to and different things we can learn. And
Totally.
once we establish that relationship, or even from step one, when we see someone else's perspective, we can start to bring those onto our map and to integrate that into how we see the world, and to expand the boundaries. And so the third step, map your evolving perspective. The first verb is to map and to include some of them. Definitely, we don't need to include all of them, but to understand them and to consider whether that's something we want to adapt or not. And then this map is also evolving. So that's why the third step is
Yes.
map your evolving perspective. And to give you an example, Hubert Joly was the CEO of Best Buy from 2012 to 2019. And when he started at Best Buy was facing a loss. And it was predicted that its suppliers and potentially competitors such as Samsung and Microsoft and Apple would run Best Buy out of the market. And what he
Yeah.
did was, Hubert Joly, he got up close. He took the first step, and he didn't. I'm sure he didn't have this framework in mind as he was doing this, but this is a great example. He got up close to these suppliers, to Samsung, Microsoft, and Apple, and he started to understand how they were thinking. And he didn't just meet with them once; he deepened his relationship with them over,
Yes.
over years. And through that, he understood that, look, these suppliers are not necessarily looking to take us out of the market. They need a place where consumers and potential customers can get up close to their products as well. And we can provide that as Best Buy. So he created what he called mini stores. And they invited these potential competitors or suppliers to come in and have their own space within the stores. And this really helped, this kind of a thinking and relationship really helped turn around Best Buy. And by the time Hubert Joly passed on the reins in 2019, the stock prices had more than tripled. And Best Buy was doing extremely well.
Yes. Great example. I know the story, so to me, it's very
Mm,
impactful. Um, also remind me one thing that I always suggest to CEOs is this idea of, I mean, it's not just about CEOs, by the way,
mhm,
whoever has a leadership role. I call the concept of the frontline leader, meaning
mm,
those leader, they get out of their magic fantastic office and they really spend meaningful time to
mhm,
listen to employees. And to me, when I say employees, includes as well anyway the customers, the other stakeholders,
mhm,
is this notion of being there and be present and talk, even to, as you say, to primarily to listen for and different perspective in terms of what is happening.
mhm,
And as you said, I think there is another thing that you said to me that really resonates. It's not just doing once, which sometimes leaders do at the beginning. They take the traditional 60, 90 days to learn, having conversation. But then they stop there as if, oh, I get it now. So my map now is clear. But given what you said at the beginning, right? It's an evolving condition, evolving context. You cannot stop there, right?
yes, and all the more today
Yeah,
with
exactly.
constant change, but also different types of change. So we can think that, oh, well, we're just going to update our maps with this small group of stakeholders over here, but you never know when the next change will come, and that
Yes.
it really creates a fear of the unknown and a difficulty in dealing with it if we don't have a framework to address it.
Yeah. Talking about fear,
Hmm.
in your book also you use an interesting concept or the idea of optimistic fear.
Hmm.
So what you mean by optimistic fear? Why is relevant for leaders?
This is very important because we often get the question, well, how am I supposed to get up close to my stakeholders? How am I supposed to deal with these problems? I'm overwhelmed. And it's easy to get stuck in what we call pessimistic fear, where we have a feeling of dread. And it often ends in fight, flight, or freeze, where we
Of
think there
course.
are no options and no hope. But if we mix in confidence, to get optimistic fear where we really see change as a possibility and not a threat. We open ourselves up to many more options and we get up close and we see a lot more detail. And so we keep our eyes open to risk and we say, yes, there is danger, but there is a lot of opportunity. And so
Yes.
whereas pessimistic fear freezes you, optimistic fear empowers you and prepares you. And leaders have used this with new competitors, new technology, unhappy investors, employee issues. And to give you a wonderful example, in 2012 at the French Open, Serena Williams lost to the 111th ranked tennis player. And the New York Times said it was one of the biggest unexpected upheavals in the history of the French Open.
Yes.
And afterwards, Serena was hitting around at a juniors tennis institution and met the coach, Patrick Mouratoglou. And
Yeah.
and he was saying, you're off balance. A lot of leaders would have said, I've been doing this for a long time. I have shown you that I can succeed doing what I'm doing. But at a certain point, as Marshall says, what got you here won't necessarily get you there. And do we have the curiosity and courage to say, I'm going to look around a little bit? And so she started talking to Patrick, who had never coached a top ranked tennis player before. And so for her to then trust this person and to explore a completely different way of seeing what she was an expert at her craft, was really remarkable. And this optimistic fear fueled her. And by the end of her career, she'd won 23 Grand Slam tournaments.
Oh,
And she
yes.
really got back on the success train. And so that's a really, for me, it's an inspiring example of how someone can, in the midst of fear and loss, really harness this optimistic fear and fuel yourself forward.
Oh, it's great, and thank you so much for bringing Patrick and Serena's story. So one, because I'm an incredible tennis fan and tennis
Wonderful.
player. Yeah, so to me, it's music for my ears, and I've been trying to have Patrick as well on the show for a while. So, but it's very busy, as you imagine, and traveling all the world for with the players doesn't make that so easy. But I was really struck with that's why I think is a great example. I mean, Patrick was also mentioning, I don't know whether you have seen it, the Netflix series, I think it was called The Playbook, where they interview 5 or 6 people, coaches, and they explain the story. And he talked a lot about Serena's story. Um, and Patrick, by the way, is great because it's more, to me, is more like psychologist than a coach. I mean,
Yes.
it's so great to get into the mind of people. But my learning from that is it takes something out of you to do what Serena did. It takes something personally. So, because you're right, living in a world of fear, losing confidence, which, by the way, is so relevant to business leaders out there. Even the best CEOs, something I say all the time, they lose confidence. They don't always operate in confidence at all. Now they don't say it. That doesn't show in the way how they talk. But you can, if you stay close enough to them, you can hear it. That is in the background.
Yeah.
So operating and changing the way how you do things, the embracing other maps, listening to others, requires courage, as
Hmm.
you said.
Hmm.
Requires courage.
Hmm.
Takes something that not many people and leaders honestly are very open to do it.
Hmm.
Even if they are aware there is something stops them
Hmm.
to take a step forward, because it requires, losing their comfort zone. It requires doing something they haven't done it before. They requires a deep introspection in terms of who they are and how they operate.
Yes.
So when they do, it's magic, as you said.
Yeah.
But not everybody does. And talking about this, Cornelia,
Hmm.
I mean, we touched a little bit early in terms of, what preventing people from doing this. So you have interviewed a lot of people. You have a great story, and the book is an example of that.
Hmm.
But what other blind spot people have that don't really allow them to step up and doing what we just said,
Hmm.
in the last 30 minutes? So one thing we said is, well, you said, the success strategy that in the past
Hmm.
is one of the blind spots because they keep operating with the same strategy no matter what's happening around them.
Hmm.
But is there any other blind spot that you recognize in interviewing and working with leaders?
Well, blind spots are really different for all kinds of people. The blind spot could be overconfidence, but it also could be seeing the world in one way, seeing a department in a certain way and saying, this is the problem and I'm convinced of it, but then maybe not getting up close and saying, okay, actually, it's a much deeper issue. In our book, we talk about one leader who had a very encompassing definition of loyalty and how they needed to interact with their team and their C-suite and managers. And it's only when they changed how they viewed themselves and how much freedom they had in their own job in challenging different people around them that they were able
Yes.
to get to the breakthrough that they needed. Blind spots can come in all shapes or forms, and it's individual to each person. But what's really powerful is when we talk to someone who thinks opposite from us and they're looking that way and we're looking this way, to be able to gain the learnings of someone who sees behind us, that's when we're really able to see our blind spots and to realize what they are, how they formed often, and to address them. And this takes courage and curiosity, as you said. And a lot of leaders ask me, so do I have enough courage? Am I curious enough? Where do I stand? And the truth is that curiosity and courage, they don't come already preformed. It's like a muscle. It's something we grow every time we get close to someone who thinks opposite to us, and to inspect one of our blind spots to say, now I'm getting the same feedback from 3 different people. Maybe I should think about it. Or I've never thought in this way, maybe it's worth exploring a different way of thinking so that I'm able to courageously and with curiosity turn around and see if I'm missing something. And that it has to do with our confidence as well, because the initial act of questioning ourselves, it doesn't mean that your whole map is outdated or that it doesn't work. Often the way we update our maps is incremental. And so we can
Yes.
admit to ourselves, I've learned something new. I'm going to replace this part of my map. Oh, I'm learning that actually this stakeholder doesn't feel that way, whereas I was assuming they were this whole time. It doesn't mean you need to throw out your whole map. And that makes it a lot easier for leaders to say, okay, I'm going to do a small exploration and see what I learn. And it's usually a low bar or a small opportunity that leads us to something much bigger. But being open to that with curiosity and courage is really the first very important step.
Yeah, I agree. And I really, really like the idea of upgrading the map versus
Mm-hmm.
changing the map.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, yes, might be required, but at that level of experience, seniority, I think it's more about upgrade than changes. So I'm with you. So last question for you,
Mm-hmm.
Cornelia.
Sure.
If FCO particularly, or any other leaders listening today, and they like the idea of becoming a more panoramic leader,
Mm-hmm.
what could be 1 or 2 actions they need to really start doing? So we thought a lot about mindset and shifting the perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of action, what do you think could be 1 or 2 practical actions they can consider to start embracing this idea?
One very easy action we can take alone when we have a quiet moment is to think, who's not at my table? Who
Hmm.
am I not listening to? Who is missing? Where are the empty chairs that need to be filled at my table so that I can first identify what my map looks like and any other people that we need to talk to. And
Okay.
then second of all, to get some easy conversations going and start to explore. Maybe we're not ready to talk to a new influencer, but perhaps we're ready to learn about them or read about them. And to find small ways to get up close. And that already will be an enormous step that's easy to take at the beginning.
Great. Very simple and practical. So, which is something I love. Cornelia, so when the book is going to be out and where people should go to learn more about you and your work?
Absolutely. So the book is coming out on July 7th and should be available at all major outlets and bookstores. And you can learn more about me at corneliachoe.com, CORNELIACHOE.com. And I look forward to interacting with as many people as possible through the website.
Fantastic. Well, Cornelia, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been, to me, such a great, amazing conversation because it resonates a lot with my experience, with my work.
Mm-hmm.
So as expected, we're so much aligned. But most importantly, I think you provide a very interesting perspective about what does it mean leading in these modern times. So thank you so much, Cornelia, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It was such a pleasure sharing ideas with you and sharing this podcast.